The neon sign of Midnight Grounds flickered against Olivia Reed's exhausted face as she pulled down the security gate. At 3 a.m. in downtown Portland, the streets belonged only to insomniacs, night shift workers, and people running from demons that emerged in darkness. Olivia fit all three categories. Her reflection in the coffee shop window showed a woman who looked older than her 26 years. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her auburn hair was tied in a messy bun with a pencil she'd forgotten was there. Her barista uniform couldn't hide the lean muscle in her arms, earned from years of martial arts training she'd abandoned when life got complicated. The city hummed around her with that particular energy of a place that never truly slept. Steam rose from manholes like urban geysers, and distant sirens painted the night in urgent colors. Olivia loved this hour when the world felt honest, stripped of its daytime pretenses. Her phone buzzed with a text from her brother, Nate. "Court hearing moved to Thursday. Need you there." Olivia's stomach clenched. Nate was 19 and facing his third strike for drug possession. The kid had more potential than most people, but addiction had its claws in him deep. Their parents had given up 2 years ago, but Olivia refused to let go. She started walking toward the bus stop, her worn sneakers silent on the damp pavement. The October air carried the scent of rain and possibility, two things Portland never seemed to run out of. The sound of screeching tires shattered the quiet night. Olivia turned toward the noise and saw a black Aston Martin careening around the corner, clearly driven by someone who thought traffic laws were merely suggestions. The car hit a pothole hard enough to make the expensive suspension scream in protest. Then she saw him stumbling out of the driver's seat, tall, probably 6'2", with the kind of sharp jawline that belonged on magazine covers. His dark hair was disheveled, and even from 30 feet away, Olivia could tell he was drunk. Rich boy drunk, the kind that came with designer bottles and no consequences. He leaned against his car, fumbling with his phone. His white dress shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, and his black suit jacket hung open as if he'd forgotten he was wearing it. Everything about him screamed money and privilege, from his Italian leather shoes to the watch on his wrist that probably cost more than Olivia made in 6 months. Olivia should have kept walking. Should have caught her bus and gone home to her tiny apartment where she'd spend another sleepless night researching legal aid lawyers and wondering how to save her brother. Instead, she found herself crossing the street. "Hey," she called out. "You planning on driving that thing?" The man looked up, and Olivia felt something electric shoot through her chest. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, gray with flecks of silver that caught the streetlight. But there was something broken in them, a pain so raw it made her own carefully buried trauma stir in recognition. "Mind your own business," he said, his words slurring together at the edges. "It becomes my business when you're about to turn yourself into street pizza," Olivia replied, stepping closer. "Or worse, take someone else with you." He straightened, trying to look intimidating despite clearly seeing two of everything. "Do you know who I am?" Olivia almost laughed. "Let me guess. Someone who thinks his bank account makes him immune to physics?" "Jackson Westfield," he said, like the name should mean something to her. It did. Westfield Industries, a real estate empire built on displacing low-income families and gentrifying neighborhoods. Olivia had watched his company destroy half the community centers in her old neighborhood, replacing them with luxury condos that locals couldn't afford. "Congratulations," she said dryly. "You're famous for being rich and heartless. Now give me your keys before you kill someone." Jackson's laugh was bitter. "Heartless. That's what they all say. What they don't understand is that having no heart is the only way to survive in my world." There was something in his voice, a crack in the armor that made Olivia pause. She'd heard that tone before in her own voice during her darkest moments. It's the sound of someone who'd learned that feeling nothing was safer than feeling everything. "Your world doesn't have consequences. Mine does." Olivia stepped closer, catching the scent of expensive cologne mixed with alcohol and something. Deeper. Desperation, maybe. The haze seemed to clear from his eyes. "What's your name?" "Olivia." "Well, Olivia," he said, pulling his car keys from his pocket and dangling them in front of her. "You want to save the world from me? Fine, but you're driving." Olivia stared at the keys, then at Jackson. This was insane. She didn't even know this man, and what she did know suggested he was everything wrong with the world. But something in his broken expression called to the part of her that had never learned when to walk away from a fight. She snatched the keys from his hand. "Where am I taking you?" "Anywhere but home," Jackson said, sliding into the passenger seat. "Home is where the real monsters live." As Olivia settled behind the wheel of the most expensive car she'd ever touched, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just made a decision that would change everything. The engine purred to life beneath her hands, and she pulled away from the curb. "I know a place," she said. 20 minutes later, they stood at a chain-link fence surrounding a construction site. Even in darkness, Olivia could see the skeletal framework of what would become another luxury high-rise. The sign proclaimed it as Westfield Plaza, scheduled for completion next year. "Your building?" she asked. "My father's building." Jackson's voice carried a weight that sobered her completely. "Built on top of what used to be the Riverside Community Center. 12 families lived in the apartments behind it, single mothers mostly, kids who used the center for after-school programs." Olivia felt ice form in her chest. What happened to them? Evicted. The city condemned the buildings for safety violations that magically appeared after my father bought the land. They stood at the fence, looking through the chain links. In the distance, Olivia could see the remnants of a playground. Twisted, metal sculptures that had once held swings and slides where children played. "I was supposed to oversee this project," Jackson continued. "Father's way of teaching me the family business. I watched them bulldoze the community center on a Tuesday morning. There were still chalk drawings on the walls from the kids' art class." Olivia studied his profile, seeing something she hadn't expected. Guilt. Real, deep guilt that had carved lines around his eyes. "Why are you telling me this?" Jackson turned to face her, and in the dim light she could see the raw honesty in his expression. "Because 3 hours ago you looked at me like I was a monster. And you were right. But I wasn't born this way." A police cruiser drove slowly past them, the officer inside giving the expensive car a curious look before continuing on patrol. Olivia realized how this must appear to anyone watching, a working-class woman and a billionaire's son standing together in the middle of the night, sharing secrets that could destroy reputations. Tonight at that charity gala, I couldn't take it anymore. All those people congratulating my father on his urban renewal projects while families are being destroyed. Jackson's voice cracked. "So I got drunk, made a scene, told everyone exactly what Westfield Industries really does. Then I stormed out and drove until I crashed into your life." Olivia wrapped her arms around herself against the October chill. "So what now? You had your moment of rebellion and tomorrow you go back to being Daddy's good little heir?" "No." Jackson pulled out his phone and showed her a message thread. Olivia read over his shoulder, her breath catching as she realized what she was seeing. "Board meeting is scheduled for 9 a.m. tomorrow. If the video of your outburst affects our stock price significantly, they'll vote to remove you as heir apparent." "Good," Jackson had replied. "Maybe it's time." "You wanted this to happen?" she asked. "Not exactly, but I'm done being part of the problem." He stepped closer, his eyes intense. "Olivia, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest." "What?" "Would you help me destroy my father's empire?" Before Olivia could respond, her phone rang. The caller ID made her blood freeze. "Who is it?" Jackson asked, noting her expression. Olivia answered, and Nate's panicked voice filled the night air. "Liv, they arrested me again, but this time it's different. They're saying I was dealing near a school. It's a felony, and I swear to God I wasn't dealing. Someone set me up. Through the phone, Olivia could hear the chaos of a police station. Voices, shouting, phones ringing, the institutional noise of a system that chewed up people like her brother and spit out statistics. "Where are you?" she asked, already reaching for her jacket. "Downtown precinct." "Liv, they're talking about 15 years minimum. I can't do 15 years. Olivia met Jackson's eyes, and she saw understanding pass between them. This wasn't coincidence. "Nate," she said carefully. "Did anyone approach you tonight? Anyone asking questions about me?" The pause that followed confirmed her worst fears. "There was this guy in a suit. Said he knew you. Wanted to make sure you were okay." "I thought he was being friendly." Olivia closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her decision to trust Jackson crushing down on her. Richard Westfield moved fast when his interests were threatened. "I'll be there." "In 20 minutes, she told Nate, then hung up and turned to face Jackson. "Your father did this." Jackson's face had gone pale. "Olivia, I swear I didn't know." "It doesn't matter what you knew." Olivia grabbed the car keys, her mind already working through possibilities. "What matters is what you're going to do about it. Anything. I'll do anything to fix this." "Good," she said, "because we're not waiting until tomorrow. We're going after your father now." Part 3. Midnight Heist. The Westfield estate perched on Lake Washington like a monument to excess, all glass and steel angles reflecting the gray sky. Olivia had seen pictures of houses like this in magazines, but standing before the actual structure felt like entering another dimension where money had bent reality to its will. "Security system has a 2-minute window during the shift change," Jackson explained as they sat in his car, hidden behind a grove of manicured trees. "Guards switch at 3 a.m. My father's study is on the 3rd floor northeast corner." Olivia studied the building's layout, memorizing exit routes and potential hiding spots. 24 hours ago, she'd been serving coffee to late-night customers. Now she was planning to burglarize one of the most powerful men in Portland. "What about your father?" "Emergency board meeting ran late. He's staying at the downtown office." "Tonight." Jackson's jaw tightened. "Probably planning my complete destruction." Olivia had spent the morning at the police station watching Nate sit in a holding cell while lawyers in expensive suits filed paperwork that would keep him locked up until his hearing. The charges were serious, the evidence too convenient, and the timing too perfect to be coincidental. Richard Westfield had sent a message. Cross his family and he'd destroy everything you loved. Now it was time to send one back. "You sure about this?" Olivia asked, checking the small camera Jackson had given her. "Once we do this, there's no going back. I crossed that line the moment I watched you fight for your brother this morning." Jackson's voice was steady, but Olivia could see the tension in his shoulders. "Watching you refuse to give up on someone you love made me realize what I've become." They moved through the darkness like shadows, Jackson leading Olivia through a service entrance he'd used to sneak out as a teenager. The house was massive inside, with corridors that seemed to stretch forever and rooms filled with art worth more than most people's houses. "This way," Jackson whispered, guiding her up a spiral staircase that belonged in a European castle. Richard Westfield's study was a temple to power. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the walls, filled with leather-bound volumes that had probably never been read. A massive desk dominated the center of the room, and behind it, a wall-mounted safe that looked like it could survive a nuclear blast. "The files are in there," Jackson said, nodding toward the safe. "You know the combination?" "My mother's birthday." Jackson's voice was bitter. Father's idea of sentiment. Olivia watched him input the numbers, each beep echoing in the silent room like a countdown to disaster. When the safe clicked open, revealing stacks of documents and hard drives, she felt a surge of anticipation mixed with terror. "These are just the physical copies," Jackson explained, pulling out folders thick with papers. "The digital files are on his personal server." Olivia began photographing documents, her camera clicking rapidly as she captured evidence of bribes, illegal evictions, and corporate malfeasance that spanned decades. Each page revealed another family destroyed, another community bulldozed for profit. Olivia. Jackson's voice was strange, hollow. She looked up to find him holding a folder marked with her name. What is that? A background check. Comprehensive. 1. Jackson's face had gone white. Olivia, he's been watching you for months. Olivia felt ice form in her veins. What do you mean? Everything. Your work schedule, your brother's addiction, your financial situation, even your foster care records. Jackson's hands shook as he read. He knew we'd meet eventually. The room seemed to tilt around Olivia as understanding crashed over her. This was all planned? The charity gala, the drunk driving, even me being at that construction site? He orchestrated everything. Before Olivia could respond, the lights in the study flicked on. I must say I'm impressed with your initiative, son. Richard Westfield stood in the doorway like an avenging angel in a $1,000 suit. He was smaller than Olivia had expected, but his presence filled the room with the kind of authority that came from decades of crushing anyone who opposed him. Behind him stood 4 security guards, 2 of whom Olivia recognized from the construction site. These documents prove everything, Tessa Martinez said, spreading the papers across her desk at the Portland Investigator. The journalist had been investigating Westfield Industries for years, but never had enough evidence to publish, until now. 3 days had passed since their escape from the Westfield mansion. 3 days of hiding in a motel room paid for in cash, jumping at every sound, and watching the news for any mention of their names. So far, Richard Westfield had kept the break-in quiet, unwilling to admit his security had been breached. Bribes. To city officials, falsified safety reports, intimidation of tenants. Tessa whistled as she scanned the documents. This is enough to bring down half the city council along with Westfield Industries. Olivia watched the journalist work, her mind elsewhere. Nate's preliminary hearing was scheduled for tomorrow, and the public defender assigned to his case seemed more interested in plea deals than justice. When will you publish? Jackson asked. He looked different now. Dressed in jeans and a plain t-shirt bought from a discount store, his usual polished appearance replaced by something more ordinary. Only his eyes, haunted and determined, revealed who he really was. Tomorrow morning, front page. Tessa gathered the documents reverently. This is the story of a lifetime. Outside the newspaper office, rain fell in sheets, turning the city into a blur of neon reflections and hurried silhouettes. Jackson took Olivia's hand as they walked, a gesture that felt both new and familiar. I've been thinking, he said as they reached her apartment building. After the story breaks, I should turn myself in. Olivia stopped walking. What? For the break-in. I'll say I acted alone, that I stole the documents and gave them to the press. Jackson's eyes were resolute. You need to be there for Nate, not fighting charges with me. That's not happening. Olivia pulled him into her apartment, shutting the door firmly behind them. We're in this together. Her tiny studio felt different with Jackson in it, smaller somehow, yet warmer. The distance between their worlds had never been more apparent than in these close quarters, where his shoulders nearly touched both walls of her narrow hallway. My father won't stop, Jackson said, sinking onto her threadbare couch. When that story hits tomorrow, he'll be desperate, dangerous. I'm not afraid of him. You should be. Jackson looked up at her, his face haunted. You don't know what he's capable of. Olivia sat beside him, close enough to feel the warmth of his body through her thin shirt. Neither does he know what I'm capable of. Something shifted in the air, between them. The tension that had been building since that first night outside the coffee shop, crystallizing into something neither could ignore. Jackson reached out, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw with a gentleness that belied his strength. I've never met anyone like you, he whispered. When their lips met, it felt inevitable, like two planets that had been circling each other, finally colliding, His hands tangled in her hair as she pressed against him, the kiss deepening with an urgency that surprised them both. For a moment, the world outside disappeared. There was no Westfield Industries, no court case, no impending scandal, just the two of them finding solace in each other's arms. Later, tangled in her sheets, Olivia watched the streetlights cast patterns across Jackson's face as he slept. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to hope for something beyond survival. The ringing of her phone shattered the moment. "Olivia Reed?" An unfamiliar voice asked when she answered. "Yes?" "This is Sergeant Donovan from Portland Police. I'm calling about Nathan Reed." Olivia sat up, instantly alert. "What about him?" "New evidence has been filed in his case. The charges have been upgraded." "What does that mean?" "It means he's now being charged with armed distribution of narcotics, which carries a mandatory minimum of 25 years. The phone nearly slipped from Olivia's numb fingers. "That's impossible. Nate doesn't even own a gun. Evidence was recovered from his apartment this evening." "I'm sorry, ma'am." As she hung up, Olivia felt Jackson's arms wrap around her from behind. "It started," she whispered. "He's going after Nate." Jackson's embrace tightened. "Then we fight. Back harder." The next morning, the Portland Investigator's headline read, "Westfield Empire Built on Corruption. Exclusive documents reveal decades of fraud and bribery." By noon, Westfield Industries' stock had plummeted 30%. By evening, the SEC had announced an investigation, and 3 city council members had resigned. Richard Westfield's response came swiftly. A press conference where he denounced his son as a troubled drug addict who had fabricated evidence to smear his family's good name. A tearful interview where he claimed Jackson had been influenced by unsavory elements seeking to destroy his family. And most devastatingly, the formal announcement that Jackson Westfield had been committed to a private psychiatric facility for evaluation and treatment, a facility owned by one of Richard's closest business allies. Olivia stood in front of the television, watching Richard Westfield lie with perfect conviction and felt a cold certainty settle in her bones. The game had changed. Now it wasn't just about exposing corruption or saving Nate. Now it was about saving Jackson. Part 5. Redemption's Dawn. The psychiatric facility rose from the wooded hillside like a modernist castle, all clean lines and reflective glass designed to look therapeutic while functioning as a prison. Olivia approached the service entrance at precisely 2:47 a.m., wearing the uniform she'd borrowed from a laundry truck earlier that day. 2 weeks had passed since Jackson disappeared. 2 weeks of frantic planning, of calling in every favor she'd ever earned, of working with Tessa to keep the Westfield scandal on the front page despite Richard's aggressive efforts to bury it. "ID, please," the night guard said, barely looking up from his crossword puzzle. Olivia held up the forged credentials, her heart pounding. This was the moment their entire plan hinged on. The guard waved her through. Inside, the facility was eerily quiet. The night shift operated with minimal staff, a deliberate choice by the administration to reduce costs, and tonight, a critical weakness in their security. Olivia moved through the hallways with the confidence of someone who belonged. There, pushing her cart of cleaning supplies toward the east wing where high-profile patients were kept, her earpiece crackled. "Security rotation in 30 seconds, Tessa's voice came through. The journalist was parked outside, monitoring the security feeds they'd hacked into. Olivia ducked into a supply closet, counting the seconds as 2 guards walked past. Then she was moving again, approaching the room at the end of the hallway. Jackson looked up when she entered, his eyes widening in recognition before quickly returning to a vacant stare. The security camera in the corner was watching. "Evening room check," Olivia said loudly, moving to the window where the camera couldn't see her face. She pressed a small device against the wall. A signal jammer Tessa had acquired through channels best not discussed. The moment the red light on the camera blinked out, Jackson was on his feet. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered, but his eyes said something different as he pulled her into a fierce embrace. "He'll destroy you." "He's already tried," Olivia replied, feeling the unfamiliar weight of the gun hidden beneath her uniform. It didn't take. They had 12 minutes before the security system would automatically reset. 12 minutes to traverse 6 hallways, bypass 2 checkpoints, and reach the service exit where Tessa waited with a running car. "Nate?" Jackson asked as they moved silently through the darkened corridor. "Safe. Your father's evidence mysteriously disappeared from police custody, and Tessa found the officer who was paid to plant it." Olivia smiled grimly. Turns out he was willing to testify once the FBI got involved. The first checkpoint was unmanned, exactly as their inside source had promised. The second required Jackson to hide in the laundry cart, while Olivia sweet-talked a young guard who was more interested in flirting than checking IDs. And then they were running across the parking lot, diving into Tessa's waiting car as alarms began to wail behind them. "Cutting it close," Tessa remarked, accelerating away from the facility. "Did you get it?" Jackson pulled a small flash drive from his sock. "Everything. Patient records showing involuntary commitments for wealthy families who wanted inconvenient relatives to disappear. Medication logs showing experimental treatments without consent. And the recording of my father explicitly ordering the director to keep me drugged and compliant." "That's the final nail," Tessa said, her reporter's instincts clearly sensing the magnitude of the story. "The SEC investigation and fraud charges were damaging, but this is criminal." Dawn was breaking over Portland as they reached the city. The sky streaked with pink and gold that seemed to promise new beginnings. They dropped Tessa at the newspaper office, then drove to the waterfront, where Nate was waiting with 2 duffel bags. The brothers hugged fiercely, 2 young men who had faced the system and somehow emerged intact. The contrast between them, Nate, with his street-tough demeanor, and Jackson with his polished edges now softened by hardship, made Olivia's heart ache with a strange mixture of pride and sadness.